Hey everybody, welcome to TPIM SR Live. I'm your host, TruePowerIsMine. Today is my honor and privilege to have such a humanitarian, a credit to the whole species of humanity. None other than the Honorable Paul Hellyer. He is a former Canadian Prime Minister of Defense from 1963 to 1967, a long-term member of the Canadian Parliament over 23 years, and the founder of the Canadian Action Party. He is also the author of Light at the End of the Tunnel, a survival plan for the human species, and The Money Mafia, A World in Crisis, and finally, Hope Restored, an autobiography. It is my pleasure and my sincere, humble privilege to welcome the Honorable Paul Hellyer to the show. And by the way, his official website is paulhellyerweb.com. That's paulhellyerweb.com. Check it out, everybody. Paul, you still on the line, sir?
Still here, you bet. Ready to go.
I am so excited. Actually, I was contacted by one of the listeners to reach out to you, and I did. And I'm so pleased that you actually answered my call and you agreed to be on this show today. So we together, my friend, can make history. Right off the bat, could you please explain to us the first head of NASA, Oppenheimer, what he described to you as the forever war plan for America or the United States after the supposed victory of World War II?
Well, I'm sorry. On the first part of the question, you mentioned a name, and I didn't.
Oppenheimer, Dr. Oppenheimer, the one that helped create the NASA program after Operation Paperclip.
Oh, well, I'm familiar with Operation Paperclip, that's for sure.
Or maybe I'm messing up the word, but he was one of the Nazis we brought over during Operation Paperclip, and he basically told you about the plan to keep the military-industrial complex funded through the forever war, the invisible terrorist war.
Yeah, well, actually, it was Werner von Braun, and he did it through Carol Roslin, who worked with him very closely and for him. And in his dying days, he told her the plan, which was that they would the so-called shadow government in the United States, which had been created post-war by these extraordinary circumstances, one would need to have an enemy in order to justify their extraordinary military expenditures.
Yes.
And he said that she told me that it would first be the communists. And so for a long time, we had the Cold War, which justified spending a lot of money on the military, more than otherwise would have been necessary. And then he said it would be the terrorists. And of course, there were only a few terrorists, not enough to justify wars. So you had the big 9/11 catastrophe when the World Trade Center was devastated, and it was a fake. It was done as what they call red flag operation under the auspices primarily of the Israeli intelligence and the Americans. And this was to create more terrorists, which in fact it did. There were just a few before 9/11, and the number that could have been controlled by police operations and intelligence operations. But of course, after 9/11 and the war was started against Saddam Hussein, terrorism became a major factor in the world, and remains so right through until this day. And that allowed another war to be started. This one in the Middle East, and then another one, and it was all part of a plan called the Plan for the New American Century, which had been put together by the Pentagon. And then the third and final stage was to be the extraterrestrials, so that when they ran out of enough terrorists to justify the expenditures, then they would say that there are a possibility of being attacked by people from other planets, and that we had to build up a huge force to resist that. It was interesting that immediately after 9/11, the American defense expenditures, which had already been higher than anybody else, were doubled, 100%.
Wow.
Just and I feel, I really feel for you, because that's been the greatest drain on your tax money.
Yes.
Well, ever since then, 9/11, when you've spent trillions of dollars just to build up this incredible military presence, and in the process, I think to jeopardize the potential safety of the whole world, because once America starts building a space force, for example, then the Russians say, well, we've got to do something to make sure that the Americans can't take us over, and the Chinese the same. And so you get these huge, huge military expenditures
Right.
for a war that can't be fought, because the weapons of war are so incredible now that the entire species might possibly be wiped out. And we just can't allow that. So we're going in the wrong direction of preparing for a war or possible war that would quite possibly make the whole planet uninhabitable. And this has happened before in other parts of the cosmos. The planet Mars, for example, was involved in the nuclear war, and it made it impossible to live on the surface of the planet. And so this is sort of the situation that has been developing for these last few decades. And it's very, very precarious, and we have to stop spending that much money on arms and start de-arming worldwide and start attacking the real problems, which are first of all, global warming, and then a financial system,
Yes.
which is so unfair, so unjust.
It's
Actually
predatory.
one great big Ponzi scheme, which allows a few people to be incredibly wealthy, while other people not knowing where they're going to get the money to pay their next month's rent,
Wow.
or to buy the food to put on the table for their families. And it's a terrible situation. And if you've been following the papers closely, there have been riots breaking out all over the world
Yes.
these last few weeks in response to small increases in taxes for essentials. And that's the mood in the world, and it's artificial. It was created by the elite people who have been running the world, and they're looking for trouble, because the ordinary people now are getting fed up to the point where they're saying, we've had enough. Enough is enough already. And it is probably the most dangerous development that we have seen since World War II, and the whole situation is very volatile.
Yes.
And that, of course, is the principal theme of the one book that you mentioned, the Money Mafia, World in Crisis. It is indeed a world in crisis, and we have to do something about it before it's too late.
That point there, Paul, is excellent, because of the fact that if we look at the world in a greater sense, almost a cosmic sense, wouldn't it be in the advantage of an alien species or race to ensure that we destroy ourselves so we can never compete like cosmically against them?
Oh, no, quite the contrary. Most of the alien species are very friendly. and most of them are more spiritual than we are. We're sort of at the bottom of the totem pole, in the sense that and this comes as a shock to most of us, that we're one of the most primitive of the species.
No, Paul, no, we can't be. We
Yes,
control the
absolutely,
earth.
right at the bottom of the totem pole. And so they want the best for us. And twice in our history, they have offered us wonderful things like a longer life, better medicine, better agriculture, and all of these things, if we would just give up our nuclear weapons. And both times they have been overruled. The offers have been overruled by the chiefs of staff, and consequently, we're in the mess that we're in today. It's not the extraterrestrials that we have to fear. As a matter of fact, some of them are doing their very best to see that disaster doesn't happen to us. And I know I have close contacts with one species, and they advised me that there are 8 species working together, but actually the whole group of species known as the Galactic Federation of Light is what you might say is on the creator's side of the struggle against the dark side. And they're trying to help us and would like to help us. But in the last few years, the American Space Force has used the weaponry, has developed the weaponry that they got from 1 or 2 species. And now it's dangerous for them to fly in because they can be destroyed. Their vehicles can be destroyed by these particle weapons that they have, the United States Space Force has developed.
Wow.
So we're in a position where a lot of people want to help us, but it's getting more and more dangerous to do that. And I should mention, though, that until recently, it was their policy, the Galactic Federation of Light, not to interfere, because one of the things that we were given by the Creator was the right to make our own decisions.
Free will.
And yeah, exactly, free will. And have we used it for our own advantage? Well, sometimes, but most of the time, it's been a struggle to see who is going to build the next empire.
Yes.
Who's going to be in control of the world. And we just haven't lost that
compulsion,
that sort of indication, that way of life of wanting to dominate everybody else and to be top dog. And instead of saying, well, let's cooperate,
yes,
and let's start attacking some of the real problems of the world, which are feeding the poor and better medicine and stopping global warming before it destroys our ecosphere and makes it impossible to feed so many people and so on. So there's some real problems that we should be attacking, but instead of that, we're still back in our old ways of saying, well, let's build the biggest empire that the world has ever seen and dominate the whole world.
It's that whole ideal of the Reich, the 1,000-year reign of whomever, because we all know we don't personally live that long, but we want to build some sort of dynasty or imperial family. Now, this type of mindset, does that go back or correlate to the fact that we're still primitive in our state of being?
I think it must. As early as 1940, the Council on Foreign Relations, the United States, decided that the Nazis were going to lose the war, and consequently that they should start preparing for a bigger and better empire than had ever existed before, including all of the land that Hitler had coveted, in addition to all of North America, which would include us, of course, and then a number of Asiatic states too around the Pacific Rim. And this has been going on ever since. And unfortunately, another group came to the same conclusion. A group of top Nazis came to the conclusion they were going to live the war, going to lose the war, and would have to capitulate at some stage, especially after the United States and Russia both came into the war against them. And so they started making preparations, and they started building a base on Antarctica, and sending some of their best engineers and scientists to Antarctica, and what they called the New Berlin. In other words, it was sort of a government waiting. And I can't get anybody to guarantee that it's still not there.
I was about ready to ask you, Paul. So there's quite literally a citadel of old Nazis and their alleged offsprings operating in Antarctica as we speak.
Yeah, and also in the shadow government, because they came in not only under Operation Paperclip, but then Allen Dulles brought in a lot more when he was head of the CIA. He had been friendly to the Nazi side of the battle, and when his brother was Secretary of State, he brought in Nazis to in effect take over the CIA.
Oh man!
And what they did in Operation Paperclip, as you know, and I guess it probably continued, was they gave these people new CVs, new names,
yep,
and then appointed them to important positions, both military and civil.
Right. You know, if that's normal, Paul, where are the Al Qaeda? If that's a normal thing to do when you're winning a so-called war, is take these people and put them in heads of academia, heads of psychiatry, heads of all kinds of, from NASA, all kinds of agencies. That's not a normal thing to do. We wouldn't have done that with Al Qaeda or Vietnam. You know, after whatever the war in Korea, take people from there and put them in positions of power over here. That's an incredibly odd thing to do.
It was an odd thing to do, but the United States and Britain were obsessed with Russia, and they wanted to have Nazi help in the Cold War with Russia, cold or hot. And so they wanted to get the Zionists on our side, if you want to put it that way, rather than leave them available for somebody else. So I think you can understand a little bit of the military approach to it. And
correct.
Of course, President Truman gave the okay, but it was on the condition that no active Nazis would be recruited. Well, then the military, and I've gone through this myself, so I know what it's all about. The military really paid no attention. They just went ahead and got anybody they wanted. And consequently, a lot of Nazis got into the United States, and both in civil and military positions. And they started exercising a very important influence in what later became known as the shadow government or the alternate government.
Yes.
And I'm sure all your listeners are aware that it's been in effect part of a very important part of the Cabal, as I call it, which has been running the United States for decades. It has just been a myth that you have had real democracy and that you have had Congresses and presidents who have been really running things. They have all been in the position of having to go along with what the Cabal decided, which has been an unhappy state of affairs, which I don't think has ended as of now. So we have a problem on our hands.
We have a huge problem, Paul, and it started in 1913 when the Federal Reserve was written into law off the coast of Jekyll Island, and most of the Senate and them were away during Christmas vacation. They snuck that in. It essentially handed over the magical talismans because dollars is what drives the country. It's what everyone aspires to achieve. It's a symbol of wealth, a symbol of prestige. Well, it's really a private enterprise now.
They took over the money creating power of the United States of America, so that people who own the right to create their own money had it taken away from them and given to a small group of the most powerful bankers in the world, and then had to start borrowing the money back from this bank and paying interest on it, which is how your debt has got up to an astronomical proportion.
Yes.
And it's all been funneled off into the hands of a very few families, which is, at the root of many of the problems of the world today. A terrible decision, and I don't know what the Congress people were thinking about. Well, it was probably sugar plum fairies, because it was right at Christmas time. And I think there was only one congressman, Lindbergh, who really understood what was going on. But worse, the real crime is that's more than 100 years ago, and they haven't done anything about it. That's the real crime, and it's still going on. So that you still have to borrow your money from the Fed, and it's just fake money. Most people don't know what money is, but today it's really just a computer entry. It's just they manufacture money out of thin air, and then poor working people have to pay it back as if it was real money with interest. So that's the reason everybody has to work so hard, is to pay this high level of taxation. Right. It is necessary to pay the interest on this fake money that's been borrowed from the banking industry for all of these years, and which has reached, if I give the figures now, I think a lot of your listeners will think it's almost incredible. They will be incredulous. And I think it was about 6 years ago, 82 families owned 50% of all of the wealth in the world.
Wow.
88 families. And the following year was 82 families. And in 2016, it had dropped to 62 families. 62 families owning half of all the wealth in the world. Can you get your head around that?
Yeah, unfortunately,
I can't.
Unfortunately, I can't wrap my head around it in its totality, but I can wrap my head around it in its savagery. Like, we have brothers and sisters, fellow human beings all around the world in so-called third world nations, basically being persecuted, being murdered for resources that those of us in the so-called first world nations work so hard using the economic system to ascertain, like the computers, the cell phones, the iPhones. It's all one huge circle. And it starts with what Paul was saying with the artificial money and the driving force.
It's a crime against humanity.
Mm-hmm.
There's no doubt about it, because in effect, 90% or more of the people in the world are money slaves, or economic slaves.
Wage slaves is what we call them on the show. They're wage slaves.
Say again?
Well, we call them wage slaves on the show.
Yeah, wage slaves. Absolutely. And some people I know, they're working 2 jobs. Some are working 3 jobs, just in order to keep food on the table.
Right.
And this is to a very large extent due to the taxes they have to pay, and a lot of the taxes go to paying the interest on the money that the government bought, the fake money that the governments have borrowed from the richest families in the world.
Yes. It's like, I had a guest on, Paul, approximately 5 days ago, and she was speaking about the crimes against humanity that's happening in Suriname right now. There's a mining corporation down there murdering the Maroon people so that they can get access to those resources. And like the same situation in Haiti, they have the mountain of iridium that we need for our spaceships. And let's be honest, Paul, we know what we're talking about. Iridium is a great heat insulation shield insulator, and that's what you need to go from atmosphere to stratosphere and beyond. So you need that in these spacecrafts that we or do not know about, though, Paul. The uninitiated do not know about these things that we're discussing, but it's quite real. And the reality that you see is people being killed, people being starved out on purpose by these international conglomerate operations to get these resources.
Yeah, it's all part of the cabal. I don't know if anybody's ever told you what the cabal consists of, and maybe we have.
Would you share it with us? Share it with us, Paul.
Oh, sure. I say it starts first of all with the Illuminati, a very secret organization,
Mm-hmm.
and then the banking cartel, which is very closely related to most of the people in the secret societies, and then the oil cartel, then the transnational corporations that you're just describing, most of which are controlled by the banking cartel, because they are the ones that can manufacture the money to buy these things.
Yes.
And then the next line is the whole group of intelligence agencies, including the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, the British CIA, MI6, and the Israeli Mossad, and then a huge swath of the United States military, primarily the Navy and the Air Force, and Space Force, of course, is included in that. So that's the group that has been running the world for decades, and I think they're interested in establishing what they call a new world order.
Yes.
And the new world order is an unelected government of, by, and for them. And to be blunt about it, it's a fascist government.
Yes.
And the people would have no say whatsoever. And frankly, it's just the antithesis of what my friends thought they were fighting and dying for in World Wars I and II.
Right.
So instead of solving our problems and people saying it'll never happen again, we set up a situation where this is in the minds and hearts of some of the people who are leaning in that direction.
It's it's almost guaranteed to happen again, just like the first Great Depression was scientifically calculated to happen and coincide at the rise of Hitler, which we all know nowadays was a German, basically, agent sent in to infiltrate the National Socialists, not basically lead them to the genocidal conclusion that they ended up doing. Now, Paul, as a prime minister, did you ever have, Minister of Defense?
I was for a while the acting prime minister, which was later designated deputy prime minister, but I was Minister of National Defense and later Minister of Transport.
When you in the Minister of Defense capacity, did you ever have any concerns about the proliferation or rise of private armies throughout the world?
No, because it wasn't really on the horizon at that time. We were, our main thrust was the Cold War.
Right.
Helping to establish NATO, which at that time was purely defensive, and which has since become more of an offensive group, in my opinion. It's been sort of taken over by the Cabal,
Right.
and it wasn't something that was high on the radar. We were just we were cold warriors, and we wanted to make sure that the Soviet Union and the communist system didn't overtake the world, and so we went all out to try and prevent that from happening, not realizing that there was something going on in the background that was equally serious.
Yes. Yeah, and that's equal. This is the point, is that we should not live in a democracy. I know that's a terrible thing to say in this day and age. We should live in a republic, to where your individual rights are guaranteed no matter who's sitting in office, who comes and goes. Because on this show, and this is to make it thoroughly clear, democracy is quite literally two racist men and one black fellow voting on who's going to do the crap work in society. That's what democracy in essence really is. But when you throw in the ideal of a republic, this is the most fundamental ideal that all humans should hold dear: freedom of person, freedom of religion, and a chance or opportunity to own the land in which you live upon. I mean, those are just three basic tenets of it. This is all being railroaded by what we're discussing with the Illuminati, the banking cartel, the multinational corporations. And then to sum it up, you have the basically bought and paid politicians. That's why it's a full circle. That's why climate change is a joke. That's why 14% of the United States citizens are food insecure as we speak right now. There is a wave coming our way. It's going to be the perfect tide. We have nuclear proliferation throughout the world. We have economic realities that must be actually met. $23 trillion. When the repo man comes and knocking, it's not going to be a situation to where, oh, we just don't have the money. There will be a austerity placed upon us, such as being placed upon Greece right now, to ensure that we make those payments. Because one of the things that people fail to realize, that the last crash or market volatility we saw in 2008 also coincided with the first payment on the interest we had to pay to the Chinese for all the debt that they bought up. So, and that segues me into another question, Paul. And this is kind of during the 80s and late 70s. Why was there a shift in the intelligence community to think that it would be a good time or a good ideal to arm China with some of the world's most advanced weaponry?
Well, you'd have to tell me the reason why. It was one of the dumbest things that I think has been done, was to pass of advanced technology and to say, I guess it was really that old business called greed. There was much to be made, and so somebody decided that they would sacrifice principle for profit, and that's a very dangerous modus vivendi for people to get involved in.
Absolutely. I mean, I hate to sound so like Tuesday night, Monday football, and after the game's already been played, now we can analyze it, but it quite literally put future generations at risk, sir. Not just here in America, but also in Canada and throughout the world.
Right.
And I know that's a tough question to ask, and obviously you weren't the only one, to voice in on that decision-making process of that time. But some of your contemporaries truly, sir, let down humanity. I mean, when we look at the way the geopolitical world is set up, we all know that the Chinese society is a very, let's say, non-individual oriented society, meaning that it's more of a collective state, and state is everything. Now, state does have a purpose and a role to play, because no one wants to live in a situation without laws and regulations. I think all rational human beings can agree. But when we go to a point to where the state can tell you how many children you can have, the state can determine potential, I guess, educational opportunities. Do you not see this as being truly the Fourth Reich forming right in front of our eyes? And instead of it being a German or a Nordic regime, it will indeed be the King of the East, an Asian regime.
I think there's you're missing a step there, though. I think that's what's planned by the Cabal, using the United States Space Force as its foil. I think that's the first major hurdle to overcome.
Is getting the corporate interest out of United States military actions?
Well, General Eisenhower warned, I was going to say us, certainly the United States, about the military-industrial complex.
Yes.
And then it was the intelligence group was added to it, and nobody paid any attention. We don't listen to our prophets.
Mm.
And that was at our peril, because it's very clear what has been going on. It's been working toward a Fourth Reich, and there have been little cells in various countries that have been sleeper cells.
Yep.
And you see them popping up every few days in the press. And so it's, and I don't use the word conspiracy, because it's just a sort of a business plan to take over the world, or most of it, and operate it as
a factory.
Right? That's the way you want to put it. I think it's quite legitimate in this case. And the question is really if it can be avoided, which I think is something that we have to put our minds to at the present.
The avoiding.
You mentioned my trilogy, the last three books and I would recommend to people that they read more books, because when Alan Dulles was asked how he was able to sneak so many Nazis into the United States, he said it's because Americans don't read books.
Wow.
I think Canadians, you could substitute that, Canadians in that same sentence. And because my contemporaries here, well, I don't have contemporaries because most of them are dead, but my fellow Canadians just don't read the kind of stuff where you can get the truth.
Right.
When the press is all controlled. And so in the Money Mafia, I give a pretty good resume of how the situation has developed since World War II, and how we've got ourselves in the state that we're in. When in the final chapter of Hope Restored, I indicate some steps that the United States government, or the United States people, rather than because it's the government problem, the United States people could do something about the situation, because they have the power if they would exercise it, but they won't exercise it if they don't know why they have to exercise it. So if you read the final chapter, 25, in Hope Restored, it gives a series of things that have to be done to change the situation. And one of the most important is to establish a bipartisan committee of Congress to let the whistleblowers who know what's been happening for the last 40, 50 years, 60 or 70 years, to tell the truth, give them an amnesty, say that you are exempt from the National Security Act, completely, totally exempt, if you will come and tell us the truth. been happening and get it out in the open so that the public are aware of the real situation rather than the fake situation as portrayed in the press, and then take the steps that seem obvious after they get the truth. And that is what we have to do, because we're talking about all the wrong things, and we've got to start talking about the really important things, and let the people who know what the situation is tell the people that don't know.
Right.
Because, as I say, at the moment, the only way you can find out is from reading books. But that's only a few people, only, just very, very small percentage of the people that read books. But you have to somehow let the people who don't read books know what the truth is.
Yes.
And it's impossible at the moment because, as my friend Daniel Estulin wrote in his, he's the one that wrote The True Story of the Bilderbergers, which I think quite a few people have read. If you haven't, you should. It's the next book. He listed the ownership and control of the English language press, both print and electronic, and showed that every major outlet in the whole world is either owned or controlled by a Bilderberger. And they're right at the top. I didn't mention the three sisters, the Bilderbergers, the Council on Foreign Relations, and the Trilateral Commission, that I call the three sisters. But they're right at the Bilderbergers are right at the top of the Cabal, and as is the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission to a lesser extent.
Now, those organizations are also organizations that a lot of our reporters belong to. Is that not true?
Some do, yes.
Like the national
Some do,
ones?
but not. I don't think very many of the reporters, but I think the reporters are limited as to what they can report, because I guess it was David Rockefeller who said he was very much one of the top dogs in this whole thing, that they couldn't have accomplished what they have accomplished without the cooperation. And he listed off the New York Times and the Washington Post and Time Magazine and other magazines and news outlets who have attended Bilderberg meetings and taken the oath to not reveal what has been said there.
See, that is a threat to all nations' security. If you want your nation to continue in any way, shape, or form it presently is existing. Because when they come at you with those austerity measures using the IMF, International Monetary Fund, it's game over for your nation, essentially. Because you will never be able to get the debt.
It's one of the methods of modern warfare that frankly the United States has engineered.
Yeah, I got a question from the chat room, Paul. They had a question about the weaponry HARP and DO. Can you speak on those technologies?
Say again?
The weapons array in Alaska, HARP, and then there's another weapon package called DO, D.E.W, weapon system.
No, I'm not familiar with it.
Okay, but you have heard about HARP, the radio antenna that we can bounce signals and generate certain effects.
Oh, I have indeed, and the whole system of geoengineering, which is part of the plan of domination. And I highly recommend Alana Freeland's books that go into great detail as to how this whole thing is being established. And you should go to Geoengineering Watch and read Dane Wigington and his colleagues' description of what has been really going on in the world of reality, of the extent to which the Cabal has taken control of the skies and they have the capability of making snow in summer. We just had a snowstorm in Winnipeg, a terrible snowstorm, which was way out of whack with what we would call normal. And they can make rain in winter. They can provide terrible rainstorms. They can make artificial earthquakes, which are so much like the real ones that you can't tell whether it's the real thing or not. And this is all going on at the same time we're reaping the benefits or the problems of higher world temperatures in the sea and the earth and the air. And so it's difficult to know whether it's the military or nature being disrupted by too many fossil fuels that is responsible for, the parts of the world drying up and the ability to feed the people being reduced and species being eliminated and others being having to go further north for their protection and so on. All these things happening, and in this world, and it's basically all controlled by the same people. And this geoengineering is something that I think is really frightening because, and I don't want to go too far down that road at the moment, but it's the kind of thing that we should be very, very concerned about. And they're building an electronic fence, as Alana Freeland points out, which partly encourages the military to start a war with Russia, and on the basis that the casualties would be acceptable. Well, this is just absolute balderdash. If they start that kind of a war, it's almost inevitable that it will escalate and that we as a species will be put at risk. So these are big stakes, but they're just those books by Alana Freeland I recommend highly because they will, you won't like reading them, but you should read them because you should know the real world that you're living in and not just the fake world that you get from your daily press, either electronic or print.
I hate to evoke the old Roman adage, but it's like quite literally we're living a high-tech bread and circus gag. They give us entertainment, they give us a little bread, but on the side note, all of our energies, all of our labors is quite literally going into building and making a system stronger to oppress us and future generations.
Yeah, correct.
This should be headline news, but instead it
should be
buried. It'll be buried on purpose.
But this is another thing that I mentioned in the money laugh. There was a whistleblower there by the name of Bill Schneider. I'm sure you're familiar with him.
Yes.
Who warned us about what the Cabal had in store for us, and it included a very drastic population reduction.
Yes.
And when I say drastic, the numbers are so big they're a little bit frightening even.
You're not being hyperbolic when you say that. You're quite. And this is what I really try to stress on this show, Paul. What you're getting into, what you're about ready to get into right now. This is quite literally real. Now, I'm not saying go out and act foolish. No, understand these things and prepare adequately. All right, because some of these things are quite literally out of your control. Nothing you can do. Keep calm and stay the course. Continue, Paul, please.
Well, there is something that can be done. That's the reason that some of us keep fighting. Because if the United States got out the truth and, for example, took back control of their money supply.
Yes.
If they took over the Fed and got the private people out of it, they would change the balance of power very, very significantly. And they could use some of the money that would be created. I go into this in great detail in many of my books, but certainly in the Money Mafia, I've mentioned what has to be done, which is that governments have to create some of the money. And I have recommended 34%. In order to balance their budget at the federal, state, and municipal levels without taxes that are as high as they are now.
Right.
And that is one of the most important reforms that could be made. But you're fighting, you're taking the Cabal on for size, and I guess persuading Congress to act is going to be very difficult because they count on this system for much of their cash for re-election.
Yep.
And if there was any real justice, they would pass a bill that made it a criminal offense for any financial institution of any kind, including the banks, of making contributions to political, either politicians or people running for office, so that they would not be subject to the temptation of going along with a system that is basically and fundamentally evil.
Exactly. Paul, we got a caller. Sister Raynetta, are you there?
Yes, hi, thank you.
Thank you.
Patrick, thank you. Thank you so much for allowing me to ask Dr. Hellyer a question. Dr. Hellyer, are you there?
I'm here. I'm not doctor,
Okay.
I'm just Paul Hellyer. Go ahead.
Paul Hellyer. Okay, ex-defense minister Hellyer. I've been following you for quite some time. I have two questions that I'd like you to answer. And if possible, Patrick stated that he would try to work out an agreement for me to interview you on my channel if possible. My first question to you is, do you believe at this stage in the game, everything on this planet has been sold? Everything, and that includes the human race. The second question is,
What was the first one that has been sold, did you say?
Everything on this planet has been sold. That includes the human race.
I didn't, there's one operative word that I still haven't got.
Okay.
It's sold.
Okay.
It's sold. It might be a little because the speaker.
Okay, I'll say that again. The first question is, do you believe that everything on this planet has been sold? That includes the human race.
One word, everything on this planet has been, and I can't say that.
Sold. Everything on this planet has been sold, including the human race.
Could you spell that word for me, please?
Yeah. S-O-L-D.
S-O-L-D?
Yes.
No, absolutely not. There are good things going on in the world. Dozens of them. Hundreds of them. Thousands of them. But they're in the minority. They're not the majority of things, but I've come in touch with them, and this, in the last 2 days, I've been involved with a group who are working in Lesotho, the little country surrounded by South Africa, doing absolutely fabulous work, helping people of various kinds, the grandmothers and the orphans and the people who have diseases that have to be looked after, and all of these things, wonderful things going on all over the world. So, but they're in the minority, and they don't have the weapons. And I'm sure they wouldn't want the weapons in any event because they're peacemakers and not warmongers. Mm. And the problem is that we're really talking here about a spiritual problem with the forces of darkness being largely in control of the weapons, and the forces of light having to fight from just the spiritual side of things. But that doesn't mean that they don't have power, because they do. They don't have to be a majority. All they have to do is be a strong minority in order to do something about what seems to be an impossible situation. But if you're like me, you say that nothing that seems impossible is impossible, because there are always miracles that are possible. And if there weren't, I wouldn't get out of bed in the morning. So what was the second question?
Raynetta,
Okay, so the second question is, looking at the trajectory of what's going on in the world, how much longer do we have before the Fourth Reich unveils itself? How much longer do we have until the Fourth Reich unveils itself?
Personally, I have no idea. I can pass on some secondhand knowledge. I heard a former, at least I think former, member of the United States Armed Forces speak in September, and he said that we should prepare for an attack within the next between 6 months and 2 years. And that's the only thing, and it's secondhand information, but I don't really think it can be taken lightly. I think it has to be taken a little bit seriously.
Now, would this attack culminate in the same style as the 9/11? More of our rights being taken away, more of the privileges being taken away?
I think you're talking exactly. You're laying out the plan. Yes, there would be no rights after it declared martial law and enforced it if it happened.
And then there's your Fourth Reich in your
Thank
face.
you so much.
Thank you, sister.
You're welcome.
You know, Paul, when we talk about these things, they're so terribly unpleasant, you know, because of the fact that, well, we're talking about human lives, and we're talking about human potential being destroyed or distorted or corrupted. Can you offer us some hope, something to make us feel good, to look forward to waking up tomorrow?
That's the reason. That's the reason I published my latest book, Hope Restored, is because I never write a book saying how bad things are without proposing some solutions.
Yes.
And the solutions are there if a few million Americans would do the things that I suggest. And if they could, if they had, you know, if they knew about it, and the people let them know about it, and there is hope indeed, and you should never give up.
You know,
but we have to. You can't just sit on your Chesterfields, as the saying goes, and expect some wonders to come along and save you. The Creator expects us to do some things for ourselves, but
yes.
to try to follow a path of light, and so that's what we have to do, and we have to fight the good fight.
Yes.
And it's possible. The question is whether or not we're sufficiently motivated, and if we care enough about not just our own lives, but the lives of our children and grandchildren. In my case, I have 5 great-grandchildren, ranging in age from 5 to a few months. And that's the reason, one of the reasons I keep fighting, not just for my great-grandchildren, but for everybody's great-grandchildren.
Yes.
That they may not even have a life unless we do something.
Exactly.
And I think we would be derelict in our responsibility if we just let things drift the way they have been going, knowing that there are plans afoot that would make it very difficult for anybody to be sure of the kind of life that we have enjoyed. Because if they start reducing population, who is going to go?
Yes.
Who is going to decide?
The eugenics.
Who is going to stay? And will even they be safe? And all of these questions are important, and I think that we have to address them, and that's the reason that I have made the suggestions that I made at the end of the book, and really hope that they'll be taken seriously.
You know, I I sincerely respect you because you actually put out this information that most people, quite frankly, if they're wearing your shoes, probably would not have the fortitude or the guts to do it. And I sense the reason why you do it, like you said, it's for future generations of humanity. We have to get this thought through our heads. We are stronger together, and we are all in this together, whether we accept this reality or not. It is our commonality in our humanity that is our strength, not our differences. That being said, do you ever see a point in time where humanity will be one?
I don't know because my crystal ball isn't working this morning.
We have to charge it up. We have to look at Tesla's
But
own
I know-
papers.
I know that if you want to teach somebody to walk, you've got to get them to take the first step.
Yes.
And so I hope that a lot of people will take the first step. Incidentally, if anybody wants an autograph copy of any of the 3 books in the trilogy, you can get them from my website. But you can also get them from your favorite bookstore or from Amazon. They're widely available.
So you're listed in Barnes and Noble, Amazon. Probably are you on audiobooks as well? Audibles?
Yes. Yeah, no, I don't think. Yeah, one of them I think is, but not the other 2.
Gotcha. And once again, the website is paulhellyer.com.
It's Paul Hellyer Web.
Yes, paulhellyerweb.com.
Paul Hellyer Web, WB.com, and that's all one word.
Correct.
Hellyer has Hellyer. A lot of people misspell it because there are a lot of similar words, just one letter difference.
Exactly. I'm also going to place the link down in the description of this video. But before we go, how can people disseminate all the lies when we have Operation Bluebeam and all these other projects of the highest sophistication and level being implemented on the citizens?
I didn't catch. I think there was another call coming in, but I didn't catch the question.
Basically, how can the citizens differentiate basically the disinformation from the real information? I mean, we had Project Bluebeam. Most people, weren't aware of all the ramification to that project, and then the Majestic 12 and a lot of their stuff is arguable, basically rewritten, I guess, firsthand accounts or whatnot of certain events.
The answer is you take with a grain of salt anything that comes from official sources. Everything. The shadow government has told the truth about anything of significance from 1947 until 2017, when they told the truth about the Russian influence in the election.
Wow.
And that was because that is something they wanted to use that was self-serving. So you can't get it from official sources. You have to read books, and there are a lot of them out there, not just mine, but a lot of them that you should try and read and find out what's going on, and then you'll want to try and organize the kinds of actions that are going to make a difference.
Wow.
So good luck, and God bless.
Yes, thank you, Paul. Thank you. Also, I'm going to send you an email after the show. I'm going to send you a link to this video. And also, I'd like to send you Raynetta's contact information, because her program, you'll be a great fit. It's just getting more people aware of what you're doing, what's going on, because this is a fight for humanity. This is a fight for our collective future. And I want to say thank you once again for the fine work you've done.
My pleasure. And my blessings and best wishes to all.
Thank you, sir.
Right on. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Yes. History made. Paul Hellyer, folks. Terrific guy. hopefully this show is giving you something to think about, some maybe some more research avenues for you researchers. I want to thank Sister Raynetta for calling in. I want to thank the chatters over there in the chat box. I see y'all over there, Sister Kathy, Brother David, Brother James, and others. This will conclude TPIM for today. I'm your host, TruePowerIsMine. Today's date, October 4, 2019, the year of our Lord. As always, I ask you to live your life with integrity without hate, envy, or greed. Brothers and sisters, please, let's try to be kinder to each other. Peace and power, unity and victory, dignity and respect, liberation. I'm out.